I'm Fishpot Pete. Welcome to my home studio. I did an Instructable a few months back on how I actually constructed this space. It's a sound isolated room in our basement, but I didn't really get a chance to walk through how it looked after I got it finished. It's an evergreen place. A lot of things are changing over time. A lot of the equipment changes, which I'm sure most of you have that experience. I mostly use this space as a practice area. I play at church every weekend, so I need a place to practice there. I like to play my guitar loud at home with the amplifiers and things, and it really helps keep things quiet around the rest of the house by having this isolated room in the basement. My son plays drums, so that's obviously something very loud. We also have keyboards and things like that that can make a lot of noise. On the flip side, once in a blue moon, I do like to do recording. And when I do that, it's nice to have a quiet space as well and have everything focused on already configured for a recording environment. I want to walk you through some of the basic aspects of this room. I'll try not to get too equipment specific. I think that's a lot of people do that, and I understand why you would do that. And I appreciate when people do that, but I do know a lot of people, we don't need to get caught up in the actual model numbers and specifications, things like that, because if we're interested, we would look them up anyway. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start with the door because that's the primary way you get in. It's the only exit entrance into this room. This room is double wall constructed, so to be fully sound isolated, I actually need two sets of doors here. I only have the outer door that goes out into the rest of the basement. If I want to make this a super quiet room, I could add a second door right here and have it sealed like the first door is. This door here gives me about 15 to 20 dB noise reduction. Believe it or not, it's a solid door. It's actually an exterior door, and I've got it sealed very well around the perimeter with all the way to the bottom and around the top and sides, everything. This room is actually the space right here where my hand is actually about a ½ inch of space between all the walls, the ceiling. The floor is concrete because it's a concrete basement. But essentially this room is isolated from the rest of the house except for this area here. But we found that where this is located in the house, it really hasn't been as near as loud as I thought it was going to be without the second door. So that's what's critical about this, is I don't have to worry so much about how loud I am in here. And on the flip side, not much sound gets in. Now we'll just walk through the room on the different areas, and I'll try to point out what I've got. The heart of the system that I use for recording, and we'll get to where I practice in a second here, but I'm using a Korg workstation instead of a computer. For myself, I find that works really well. I've had Korgs for a dozen years or more, workstations, and I've been really pleased with the way they work. They're simple to use, they're intuitive. You don't have to worry about system updates or Windows crashing or a Mac crashing or whatever. It's not it's a computer, but it's dedicated just to recording. So I like having the sliders on there, for example. I find that to be very useful for me. The screen's kind of small on this thing, but again, I don't want to get too much in the technical details. Having a workstation works really good for me, and everything from a recording standpoint goes through this unit here. From here, I will go to a PC, in this case, a cheap little laptop, to send it, just to get it into to our home network, and then I can work on it with another machine somewhere else if I'm doing some other sound processing or whatever. So that's the core of my recording system. Now the signal chain can take a lot of different forms. Basically for me, I do have some compressors. I got a rack compressor here. I've got a couple more compressors up here I can pull in if I need to. I don't have too much as far as outboard equipment because a lot of this stuff is built into the workstation. Good, bad, or indifferent, it is what it is. I do have a decent pair of monitors. I think that's important from a recording perspective. I did find when I bought these, I think my mixes got a little bit better. I'm not a professional. This is just something fun that I do. I don't expect to have professional results, but I want to get nice results. That's something that I would enjoy or to share with some of my friends. The sound system, the way I've got this room wired, there's two main circuits, or two circuits, period. One is going to go to the studio equipment, and the other circuit goes to the lighting. I got a little shop behind the workbench back here, and we'll look at that in a second. But I've split those into two different realms, so I don't have any lighting on the amplifier electronic circuit, and then likewise, electronics are not on the house circuit, we'll call it. But it's two isolated circuits, and that seems to help a lot as far as noise control. One thing happened recently was we had a lightning strike a few houses down, and I had no problems whatsoever on my electronic side. I did have a problem on my home network side, which is in this room as well. Part of it is in this room. It actually knocked out a router and my security system, and actually knocked out the Ethernet connection on my laptop here, and I have to go with an external USB adapter for that. But the point being there is that you want your system isolated from a surge protection as well. So I do have a Furman unit here that all the electronics goes through this device. So everything except for the amplifiers, my guitar amplifiers, goes through this conditioner. So my keyboards, the workstation, all that stuff goes through a power conditioner first. And I have the option, if there's a bad thunderstorm, which I probably should have done last time, but I didn't, I can unplug one plug here, and that takes actually two plugs here, and that takes all my electronics off this circuit. I do have another power conditioner over here, and we'll see that in a minute. That pretty much wraps up this area here. As far as my countertops concerned, I just used an MDF product. They were 4x8 sheets, and I cut it to the size I needed. These fronts look a little thicker. It's actually 3/4 inch MDF, but I doubled up on the fronts about 3 inches back to give it that bigger look. And plus, I think it adds a little bit of support as well, so I don't get any sagging. The same thing with the shelves up here is MDF. I just cut them to size, made them kind of round, and I chose a color that I liked. That has worked really well. One of the other things I have is several places around the back of these shelves and the worktop are holes for cable management. That was one thing in the past when I've had another studio setups, is I didn't really have good cable management. That's always been a problem. So I try to run everything underneath the workstation or workspace and route it up somewhere else where it needs to come up. So that's worked out really well. It gives me a lot of flexibility. I left these open underneath, and I'm glad I did. Some people maybe like cabinets, but by leaving this open, it's really easy to get in there and change out cables and snake things around. Now, it may not be as pretty underneath, but on top, I don't have the clutter, and underneath you have plenty of room to keep things straight, or however you want to organize your cables down there. So this has worked out really well. And the only other thing really in this area is playback. So I've got a couple of baby Advents for just general listening to music. If I had the laptop listening to YouTube, a lot of times if I'm playing along with this thing on YouTube or learning a song, it's good to have some just general purpose stereo speakers. I do have a subwoofer down here as well that takes the lower signals for this room. And it's funny, it's only like a 6-inch sub on there, but you'd be surprised how much bottom end it gives you. And for music, it's great. I think for home theater, that would be way too small of a speaker. But for music purposes, this works out real well. I do keep a couple others. I got another external speaker here of a cabinet I made. I've got a little, that's actually a Silvertone over here that I made the cabinet for. It's was one of those amps in a case, and I converted that over, took the amplifier out in the speaker and put it into a new cabinet, so it's more usable. I like having several different kind of amplifiers around just to get some different sounds and just to kind of change it up a little bit during my practices. Let's move on to the amplifiers. Okay, the next section I wanted to talk about is my amp wall. Just like I talked about the electronics on my rack system and my workstation that was on that separate circuit, these are on the same circuit as that separate circuit. So these are isolated as far as the input power that comes into them. I've got an acoustic amp, I've got a bass amp. These are both solid states. I've got two tube amps. I guess the Vibroach amp is a tube modeling amp, so it's a hybrid. But the Ignator is certainly a tweaker, is a tube amp. In this room, because it's so well insulated, any kind of heat generating device can be a little annoying if you're not careful. Just that it can get kind of warm in here. I do have some ventilation, but if you're recording, you tend to turn all the ventilation off. So just keep that in mind. If you have a system like this and you have a big tube amp or several tube amps that you've got on, that does heat up the room. So just keep that in mind. I've got my rack, my pedal board. I use that mostly at church. It's fun to play with, but usually I just leave that at church when I'm not, and I don't leave it here too much, but I may not be actively playing guitar for several weeks or months at a time. And if that's the case, I'll just bring it home to keep it safe. I also have a Jam Man. I don't use that too much. I'm not too big on it, but one thing I do, if you like recording your own stuff or getting some ideas for jams or just practice, I have another device called a Trio, a Digitech Trio. This is a blast. If you haven't heard about these things, you really need to look it up and do some research. They have a newer one as well that has a looper built into it. But these are just great. I've got the first version, and the Trio is a lot of fun. I actually have that go through my sound system, the Advent speakers when it plays back, and you can just jam for hours on that thing, and it's just really a lot of fun and easy to use. Above the amplifiers, I have a couple of shelves for storage. They're pretty heavy duty shelving. They're actually meant for shop use, but they're definitely worthwhile. You can put a lot of weight on these things and not worry about it. These go right into the studs and have held up good. I've actually had these things for a long time when this area used to be my workshop before I converted it to a studio. So it was part of that workshop as well and held a lot of power tools. So I feel pretty comfortable about that. I also have my one swing mount for a guitar, so I generally have like an active guitar that I'm playing at any given time. I tend to leave that hanging up in here. The acoustics I might leave in here for a while, but I try to put those back in the case whenever possible. I've actually got an acoustic sitting out right now. I'm playing with the song that I'm trying to learn, but I try not to keep them out for more than, good Lord, for a week or something. If it's starting to get dry here because it's starting going into winter, so I'll probably be putting that back in the case more often than leaving it out in here. But it's a nice safe spot to keep things away from the kids and the grandkids, so I don't worry too much about leaving guitars out from that perspective. Let's move over to the keyboards now. We've got my keyboard area. I'm not really big on keyboards. I love playing with them. I'm not a keyboardist or a pianist in any shape or form, but I do like using them to make noises, and I do have a workstation, a Korg workstation here. I have a lot of Korg stuff if you haven't noticed. My son uses this quite a bit. It's done a lot of fun things with it, so I do enjoy using this, and again, I like having it as a separate area, everything out ready to go, just flick one button. This is on a power conditioner as well. It's a PowerWorks 2020. I don't think people are as familiar with those. I don't know necessarily what quality they are. They certainly work as a power strip. They do have surge protection in them and some sort of power conditioning, but I've never seen any numbers on them on how good they are as compared to a Furman or some other professional level power conditioner. I also have a old school cassette deck right there, but I've also got one of the things I do have in this area is my security system for the house. So this is connected to a network, which then leaves the house, but that's where I store all that stuff. All the cable wires come into that box right there. So that's actually accessible from another machine. I don't even worry about it. It just sits there running all the time and minding its own business, and that's worked out real well. A few other pieces of equipment up here, again, just storage, and underneath is the same thing. For these, I'm just using some 3-drawer plastic Rubbermaid type. These are Sterites, but plastic shelving or plastic drawers. This has worked out real well. I've got 3 of those. They're like $12 each, and they really hold a lot of stuff and keep clutter out. Again, these are pretty lightweight, and you can pull them out if you need to get back to your cables and things. Again, I didn't necessarily want to have cabinets in here or even regular drawers. It's just I want things accessible, and so these are easy to pull out and get back there if I need to. I've actually got some other junk stored behind there. I don't like to store too much junk, and that was one of the reasons I built this space, is to reduce how much clutter I had in my studio setting. Okay, moving over to the drum area now. I actually kind of envisioned having the traditional leather couch in the studio at this area right here, but actually the drums moved in instead, and that's worked out to be a pretty good spot. These were actually in my workshop when this was a workshop as well, and kind of got in the way. They still get in the way a little bit, but in this space here, I'm able to tuck them back when they're not in use. When my son's using the drums or my grandkids come over and they want to play with them, this is a pretty good spot. They stay here, and the noise is again controlled by this room. So I don't really play drums. They're just there and for other people to play. Okay, in the last part of this tour, as far as the walls are concerned, this side of the room is devoted to a workbench. Like I said before, this whole area was actually a woodworking shop, a metal shop, a repair shop, electronics, everything I was doing in this little room. I've since moved my main shop up into our garage, and I have a purpose-built bench up there. Maybe someday I'll give a tour of that. But I wanted to keep something down here as a workbench to work on guitars, do some minor electrical repairs. Just it's good to have a space like this. It's inside, it's warm. Again, I can close the door. I don't have to worry about people getting into things, but usually it's pretty lightweight stuff. So, I do have like a magnifier and stuff, but basically I just have a few bits of some mostly computer stuff, some AV stuff, electronics, small hand tools, nothing like a sander or a jigsaw or anything like that. Everything is pretty, maybe drill is like the only power tool I have in here. And I try to keep it to that, but this has been real handy. Just a place to change batteries or, repair electronic device, maybe I really wouldn't even use it to change like a vacuum cleaner belt or something like that. That's too messy. So I want to keep clean projects in this area. I do have a computer over here as well. That's been kind of handy to have that when you're working on something. You can look up a YouTube or listen to music or whatever, or can do it over here as well. But it's handy to have a computer right above your workstation like this. Just if you're doing a repair or something and you're doing a step-by-step thing off of YouTube, you can follow it real easy. So that's pretty much it as far as this other space is concerned. Underneath, again, I left it open. I was thinking about putting some kind of cloth over this other side, but I just thought I'd just go ahead and keep it open. But I did want to keep this part covered up because it is bare wood. I didn't really feel the need to do anything. It's a workbench, but I thought just by putting a cloth over it like that, kind of cleaned it up a little bit and made it a little nicer. Okay, I want to spend a few seconds and talk about the ventilation in this room. That's one of the key things and one of probably the more troublesome parts to get this room to where you want it. Ventilation is important. As soon as you close the door, any heat, right now I'm recording, and so I've turned the ventilation fan off, so there's no air being circulated through here right now. But the room is set up that it brings air in from my office on the other side of the wall. It comes into this large wall area here, and it's called a dead vent. And this is actually a series of, like a maze that goes through here. It brings air in back and forth through this insulated system, comes up to the ductwork, and then comes in this crossover pipe. And that cold air, I'll call it the cold air that comes in, or heated, I guess, would enter the room here. So this room gets air when the fan's on. It blows air from here, from the office outside. So the temperature of the office outside determines what the temperature in here is going to be. After this air comes through here and it wants to leave, it's going to go out through the vent up here. I don't know if you can see that. But there's an exhaust vent up here, return vent, however you want to call it. And again, that goes into the office as well. And this is the same thing. It's going to come, I can't remember exactly. I think it comes down around here. Again, it baffles back and forth, comes out, and then comes out into the office on the other side. So this whole area, this whole thing here is a chamber with two parts, an intake and an exhaust side. And it's an integral part of the whole system. Obviously, it's built in. But this is one of the things that keeps sound in and keeps sound out. So it's part of that isolation system of the whole room. So that's why it's important. This was actually one of the more design-oriented things of this whole project. But this has worked out real well. So if you're going to do something like this, you definitely have to think about your ventilation. That could be just the total downfall of your project if you don't have ventilation in your studio. There's an inline fan in the back here. I've left that kind of open for accessibility in case I need to replace it or do an adjustment or something. So the way I have this system designed, or the way it gets controlled, is I have a motion detector in this room. And when you walk in, it turns the circuit on for the fan. I've got two settings, a low and a high. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. This is low. I don't know if you're really going to hear that or not. I can feel it in the room as soon as it turns on. That's low, and I'm putting it on high now. But that turns on, and that stays on the whole time you're in this room. And when you exit the room, it stays on for another 15 minutes. You can adjust that with this motion detector here. But that's been really good because you can come in here in this room and otherwise get no ventilation or very little. I usually leave the door open during the day. So if I come in just to grab a screwdriver or something or do something in the studio, that fan will come on while I'm in here. Even the cats, when they come in here, because they explore the house all day long, but every time they walk in here, that'll kick it on as well. So it's good to have that circulation going and keeps the area fresh. You don't want moisture building up or anything. That's why I leave the door open all the time. I want this room to be actively, the air circulating through here, not let any stale air build up in here. And in general, this works out real well. You don't get any kind of mildewy smell or stale smell. There's plenty of air coming through here. I think I've got about 10 to 15 air exchanges per hour. I think it's whatever I think hotels, and they have recommended settings, but I calculated this space and how much air should be coming through. And so when it's on high, that's really the setting that allows it to have whatever I measured out to be. I don't remember what it was, but that does certainly move plenty of air through here. And with that fan on, it really, you never get that hot. But like I said, if you have your tube amps on or all the other equipment is on, you definitely can get that heat buildup in here. So one of the other things I did in this room was to put LED lighting. So I've got LED lighting on the top. I've got 2 over here and 1 over on the other side. Plenty of lighting in this room, really not a problem with shadows. My shop light is LED as well. So I knew that having regular incandescent lighting would certainly be a problem. Even the CFLs can generate a lot of heat. And so I thought darn sure that I don't want the heat buildup in here. So going with these LED lights have made a huge difference. One of the other things I have in here was I actually came across this exit sign at Lowe's, I believe, or Home Depot, one of the two. It was on clearance for like $10. But I really like having this in here. It's kind of cool. My lights are on a dimmer. And I got the shop light on, that's why you still see a bright light. But you can actually turn these lights off, and I don't know if you can see this red glow or not, but this room will have a really cool red glow all the time. So even when the lights are out, it's kind of a cool looking room, and it's fun to turn the lights out and have this as your only light source. One of the nice things about this too is if the power did go out and you're in here, these lights kick on, and they're probably good for, I don't know, 15 minutes, I don't know, hour, I have no idea. But you can certainly, because this room is dark, it's solid dark. So it's really cool to have this thing here where the lights will go on in case there's any kind of a power failure. I've seen it flicker when we had some flickers here over the years. Since I built this, I think I have seen this kind of flash on a couple times when we had some power outages. So it certainly works great. It's been again, kind of a fun thing. It's this huge industrial exit sign on my little studio, but it makes a cool light. It's good for emergency backup on the lighting here. And if somebody was in here and the lights went out and they couldn't figure out how to get out, they would know where the door is. So I hope you enjoyed my studio tour. I hope I didn't bore you with any needless details. This is a room I use a lot. I'm in here, if not every day, several times a day, several times a week. I'm trying to do some YouTube videos, so I've got my camera set up and stuff like that is stored in here as well, my wireless mics. So in closing, I would just like to thank you for watching.